Hello.
My name is Althea Morvan, and last night, my stepmother ripped my dress in front of 60 people, my father watched and did nothing, and I walked out with a billionaire's jacket on my shoulders and justice in my pocket. I pulled the door open myself, no one waiting to greet me. Just a silent valet who barely made eye contact as I stepped out of the car and onto the damp cobblestone drive. The laughter from inside rolled toward me like a tide, warm and vibrant, but none of it was mine. The air smelled of salt water and magnolias. Charleston held onto its spring like a secret. The manor shimmered beneath lanterns strung across its colonial columns. It was beautiful, and it made me feel smaller than I already did. I approached the check-in table. A young woman in a black dress scanned the list, her nails tapping the clipboard like an impatient metronome. "Name?" she asked without glancing up. "Althea Morvan." She flipped 2 pages, paused, and then looked under the table. Finally, she held up a tinted card, creased and scribbled in pen. Alyssa Marvin. The N was backwards. I stared at it for a second longer than I should have. "It's me," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. She nodded and waved someone over. "Follow him, please." I trailed the usher across the ballroom. Chandeliers glittered above, their crystals scattering light across lacquered floors and pastel gowns. The violin quartet played Vivaldi. Every table sparkled with gold-plated cutlery and towering floral arrangements in pale pink and ivory. None of it made me feel welcome. They led me to a small table in the far corner, near the swinging door to the restrooms. Every 30 seconds, a gust of air brushed the back of my neck as the door opened and shut. The scent of lemon disinfectant drifted past me on repeat. There were 3 other chairs at the table, all empty. One with a broken leg, propped awkwardly. No nameplates. No linens. I sat down and folded my hands on my lap. Looking back now, I should have turned around. That's where it all started. I thought of my mother. She used to say that every name deserved to be written with dignity. On birthdays, she hand-lettered place cards in blue ink on ivory cardstock, even if there were only 5 of us. She never rushed the lettering. Every curve, every serif had its place. And here I was, Alyssa Marvin. Not even a typo, just indifference. I glanced around. My father stood near the cake table, swirling a glass of something dark. He looked thinner than I remembered, or maybe more expensive. Tailored suit, sharp shoes, that new silver in his hair. When he finally caught sight of me, we locked eyes. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He turned and adjusted his cufflink, the same way you'd straighten a frame that was slightly off. That moment didn't just hurt.
It hollowed me.
Vera appeared then, gliding across the room in emerald silk. Her earrings caught the light like daggers. "Oh," she said, pausing at my table like she'd spotted a stain. "You made it." I stood. "I got the message yesterday." She blinked. "I thought you weren't coming. You're usually so busy."
Busy.
Like I'd ever been too busy for family. Like she hadn't made it impossible to show up. Her smile thinned. She glanced at the empty table. "Let me know if you need anything. We're just about to start the toast." And just like that, she was gone. Her perfume lingered, a cloying mix of roses and something bitter I couldn't name. I sat back down, slower this time. There were no menus at this table. No servers came by. Even the candle in the centerpiece was unlit. I wrapped my hands around my clutch, knuckles white against the leather. My pulse thrummed in my ears. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. The room shifted. Someone clinked a glass. The quartet softened. A man in a tuxedo raised his flute of champagne, smiled toward the stage where Zinnia now stood. The birthday girl.
The star. The daughter.
She looked radiant, of course, hair curled just enough, dress hugging every perfect inch. Her voice floated over the microphone, thanking everyone, praising Vera, calling her Mom of the Century. The guests laughed.
Clapped.
Someone dabbed tears. My name didn't come up. Not once. No mention of me co-signing Zinnia's college loan. No nod to the summers the first baby sat so Vera could find herself. No acknowledgement of the woman sitting alone near the bathroom. So when they raised their glasses in one unified motion, I did too. Not because I believed in anything being said, but because I didn't want them to see my hand shake. He didn't even say my name. The toast ended, and so did any doubt about where I stood in this family. I sank back into the half-cushioned chair near the swinging restroom door, my dress catching slightly on the chipped wood beneath the table. My name card, if you could call it that, was already curling at the edges. Then the lights dimmed. A hush spread over the room like a blanket, thick, stifling. Piano music began, soft and sentimental. All eyes turned toward the screen at the front of the ballroom. A slideshow flickered to life. Zinnia, age 5, covered in frosting and giggles. Zinnia, in her cap and gown. Zinnia at the beach. Zinnia on her first date. Zinnia twirling with Vera at a charity ball. My father stood behind them in one frame, his hand resting proudly on Zinnia's shoulder. They laughed harder with each new image. Someone murmured, "She was always the golden one." No one disagreed. I waited. Maybe a photo from before Vera. A family trip to Asheville. Me in braces, holding Dad's hand. Me helping Mom bake her infamous pecan pie. Something. Anything. But the screen never flinched. Not even a stray image. Not even a mistake. Looking back now, it wasn't that they deleted me. They never bothered to include me. The screen didn't just exclude. It condemned. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded, fingernails digging gently into my palm. That's when she tapped my shoulder. "Excuse me," a woman in a navy gown whispered. "Could you bring me a glass of Pinot?" I blinked at her. She tilted her head, smiling politely, as if I'd misunderstood. As if my black dress and lack of table company made me obvious. "I'm not staff," I said quietly. "Oh," she blinked.
Sorry.
"It's just never mind." She turned without embarrassment, just mild annoyance, the kind reserved for someone who had failed at a simple task. Zinnia caught the exchange from across the room. She smiled, a slow, knowing curve of her lips. Not cruel, not mocking.
Just.
Entertained. And she didn't correct the woman. She just turned back to her guests, still the center of their universe. I didn't realize it at the time, but that moment carved the first real crack into what I'd been holding together for years. That's where it all started. I thought it couldn't get worse. But I was wrong. Margot entered the room 5 minutes later, flawless as always. Her hair in a sleek bun, her dress hugging in all the right places. She saw me.
I know she did.
Our eyes met for a split second. Once, we'd been inseparable. Shared dorm beds during finals, traded secrets like currency. I held her hand the night her ex left her. She drove 4 hours just to be at my mother's funeral. And now, she walked right past my table and sat beside Zinnia.
Kissed her cheek.
Took the champagne offered to her. Clinked glasses. I waited for a glance. A nod. Anything. But her back stayed turned. I wasn't even angry. Just embarrassed. I'd expected more. "I guess loyalty expires too," I muttered under my breath. No one heard. No one responded. My voice didn't carry beyond the edges of the ignored. The photos kept flashing. Zinnia with a rescue puppy she never kept. Zinnia at prom with the boy she claimed she didn't remember. Zinnia sitting at my mother's grand piano, smiling, pretending it had always been hers. I could barely breathe. The room smelled like sugar and roses. Too much.
Too thick.
Like icing on a cake no one was allowed to touch. I closed my eyes for a second, tried to steady myself. The lights behind my eyelids danced. The memories knocked. I saw my mother's hands placing candles into a birthday cake. Just one photo of me and her would have told the truth. Would have reminded anyone that I once had a place at this table. But truth in this family had become inconvenient. And so I sat there, watching my own erasure presented as celebration. The applause when the slideshow ended was thunderous. People stood,
Clapped.
some even whistled. I stayed seated. My hands still rested in my lap, though I could no longer feel my fingertips. The chair beneath me felt like it was shrinking. Or maybe I was. Folding into myself, piece by piece. They celebrated her. They always would. And maybe I'd accepted that long ago. But tonight it became real. It was no longer about not being chosen. It was about being forgotten on purpose. I didn't clap, because the silence inside me was already louder than anything in this room. I brought a gift they'll never remember, but it meant everything to me. I waited until the crowd thinned, until the wine was poured and Vera's voice got busy thanking the real family for always being there. I slipped away from my corner and walked quietly toward the gift table tucked behind a curtain of tulle and eucalyptus. In my hands was the one thing that hadn't betrayed me, Mom's locket. It was wrapped in soft, pearl gray paper.
No plastic bows. No goldy glitter.
Just a blue ribbon, the same shade as the blouse Mom wore the last time we had lunch together. She loved simple things. Quiet beauty. I tied the ribbon tight, added a tag. To Zinnia from Althea. I thought maybe, just maybe, if she opened it, touched it, wore it, she'd remember that I existed for more than errands and babysitting shifts. I laid the box gently on the table. My fingers lingered longer than they should have. And then I walked away. I didn't realize it then, but the locket was never going to reach her hands. That's where it all started. Later, as she opened her mountain of gifts, I waited. She giggled at designer perfumes, squealed over a custom bracelet, fawned over a box from some influencer brand I'd never heard of. Then came a package in a shimmery gold bag. She pulled out a scented candle.
Cheap.
Mass-produced. The kind you find on clearance in the back of a supermarket. Oh, she said, laughing. Someone knows I love lavender. The room chuckled with her. No mention of me.
Not even.
No card.
No locket.
I stared at the box in her hands. That wasn't mine. That's when I knew Vera had seen it first. And decided it didn't fit the aesthetic. The locket wasn't expensive. Not anymore. But it had Mom's initials scratched on the back from her college days. It smelled faintly of the rose oil she used to dab on her wrists. She kept a picture of me inside. 4th grade. 2 missing teeth. Pigtails. I remember wrapping it slowly, lining the box with velvet, folding tissue paper like origami. And now it was somewhere else. Maybe in Vera's purse. Maybe in the trash. Maybe it never mattered to anyone but me. Looking back now, I should have known it would end up forgotten. But that didn't make it hurt any less. As I stood watching from the back of the room, Zinnia walked past me toward the main floor. Her dress caught the light, deep emerald green.
Satin. Backless.
I knew that dress. It was the one I saved for, dreamed about, added to my wish list 2 years ago, and never bought because Mom's medical bills came first. I deleted it from my cart, promising myself that someday, when the time was right, I'd wear it to something special. Now it was here,
But not on me.
Zinnia twirled slightly, letting the hem sway like a whisper of everything I'd never been allowed to keep. The applause was loud. Some woman whispered, "She looks like royalty." I stepped back into the shadows.
She didn't steal the dress. Not really.
But she'd taken the moment. Again. It wasn't just fabric. It was a future I'd once believed in. I needed air. I moved toward the side hallway, past the coat racks and gift attendants, until I stood near a service door cracked just enough to let in a breeze. That's when I overheard them. Two women chatting over flutes of champagne.
So,
Dorian Kessler's name came up on the donor list last month. One of them said. The other laughed. Isn't he the guy Vera thought was trying to scam her? My stomach turned. Yeah, she tossed the check. Said no one sends money anonymously unless they're up to something. I stepped into view. Did she say what name was on the envelope? They both blinked at me, then shook their heads.
No.
Why? I smiled faintly. No reason. But inside, something cracked. That was the first check Dorian ever sent me.
Quiet.
Private. Meant to help with rent when Mom was in hospice. I never got it. I thought maybe he forgot. Maybe he changed his mind. But it never arrived because Vera threw it away. She saw his name. She recognized the potential. And she made it disappear. Like me. I didn't storm out. I didn't confront anyone. I just walked to the restroom, stepped into a stall, locked the door. Pulled out my phone. I scrolled through my contacts. Found Zinnia. Hit remove from favorites. Then blocked the number. Not out of spite. Not out of rage. Out of clarity. I sat for a long time in the quiet. My hands on my lap. The ghost of the locket still resting between my palms. They don't stay up at night thinking about what they took from me. So why should I keep losing sleep over their approval? I stood. Straightened my dress. Checked my reflection. I looked like someone who didn't need to explain anymore. I stepped out of the restroom stall with a steadiness I didn't entirely feel. The reflection in the mirror didn't look victorious, but it didn't look broken either. Something in me had gone quiet, so quiet it began to settle. I rejoined the party just as the music shifted again, a faster tempo swelling as servers weaved through the ballroom with trays of champagne.
Toasts had resumed.
Laughter rolled like thunder. I didn't belong here, but I wasn't about to disappear quietly anymore. I reached for a glass of water from the side table near the stage. Just water. I wasn't in the mood for the taste of forced celebration. That's when Vera brushed past me. Too close. Too intentional. Her perfume hit before her words did. Heavy, sickening sweet. The same scent she used the first Christmas Dad gave her my mother's jewelry for safekeeping. Trash like you doesn't deserve to wear something like this, she muttered, her eyes scanning the neckline of my dress with disdain. Before I could move, her hand reached out, quick, sharp. Her fingers hooked under the silk near my collarbone and yanked. The sound was not delicate. It was violent. A harsh, tearing rip that silenced everything around us. Forks paused midair. Conversations choked mid-laugh. Someone gasped audibly. My shoulder was exposed. The sleeve of the dress, my mother's dress, hung limp, shredded. I didn't breathe. Not because I was afraid. Because I didn't want to give her that satisfaction. Looking back now, that moment didn't humiliate me. It defined her. That's where it all started. I turned my head, just slightly. Enough to meet my father's eyes across the room.
He saw.
I know he did. He watched Vera's hand move. Watched the fabric tear. Watched his daughter, his blood, stand there half-exposed in front of 60 people. And he did nothing. Not a word. Not a step. He raised his glass and took a sip. Like it didn't happen. Like I wasn't happening. That was the real tear. That's when something colder than anger slid into my chest. It wasn't just the silence. It was his choice to preserve his comfort over my dignity. The room recovered like it always does after a well-masked blow. Someone clapped again. The violinist picked up the melody. Vera turned with a smirk so slight it could be mistaken for a twitch. And Zinnia walked by. Same green dress. Slightly shorter hem. Deeper back. Paired with heels I once saved 3 months for before Mom needed emergency care again. She looked at the torn fabric dangling from my shoulder and raised a brow. Next time, she whispered without stopping, try something you can actually afford and pull off. She didn't wait for a reply. I didn't offer one. My fingers curled around the edge of the dress. Not to hide, but to hold it. To keep from letting the weight of all their smirks pull me under. Nobody stepped in. No one handed me a shawl. No one stood beside me. I was alone. Again.
On cue.
And yet, I didn't feel like leaving.
I don't know why.
Maybe because shame no longer had power over me. Maybe because I was tired of being the one who left to keep things peaceful. I stayed. Because I needed someone else to squirm for once. My mind drifted to the last time Mom wore this dress. Her birthday. We had lunch at a quiet cafe near the harbor, just the two of us. She wore the dress for no reason except that it made her feel like herself again. Her scarf was tied loose around her thinning hair. Her nails painted. Her voice steady. She looked at me and said, I want you to wear this someday and feel like your name means something again. That memory hit harder than Vera's hand ever could. And now, the same silk hung torn mocked, under crystal lights and strangers' stares. But I didn't crumble, because in that second, I realized they couldn't touch her memory unless I let them. I adjusted my posture, lifted my chin. I picked up my clutch, not as a prop but like a weapon, and I walked, not to the door, not out, but across the room, deliberately, calmly. I passed my father. I didn't stop. He didn't blink. I passed Zinnia. She smirked again. I let her. I walked to the far corner, into the shadows by the staff entrance where the real stories of this night would be whispered by sunrise. Because when people try to destroy you in front of an audience, they never expect you to walk back into the same spotlight with more eyes watching them than you. They never expect you to return with witnesses. And I was done being invisible. The light shifted before the doors even opened. A subtle hush fell over the room. Not planned, not part of the evening's program. Just a ripple, instinctive and spreading, like animals sensing a storm before the thunder hits. I turned toward the entrance, my clutch still clutched tight, my shoulder still exposed beneath the torn silk. And then he walked in. Dorian Kessler didn't need a spotlight. He brought gravity with him. Black suit, no tie. His hair slicked back, posture relaxed in a way that only people with nothing to prove ever really master. The doors didn't creak, but the whole room stilled anyway. He walked like silence was something he paid for in full, and owned the rights to. And he was here.
For me.
That's where it all started. I didn't move. Not right away. Because when someone like Dorian shows up uninvited at a party like this, people whisper. And they were whispering now. Is that
Dorian Kessler?
What is he doing here? Why would he? Vera's face turned the shade of linen left too long in bleach. This isn't real, she breathed, just loud enough for Zinnia to hear. Just loud enough for me to savor. Dorian didn't look at them. Not once. His eyes found mine, steady, unreadable. Then he walked, calm and controlled, through the rows of startled faces, straight toward me. Not to cause a scene. To end one. He stopped in front of me.
No teatrix.
No flourish. Just a pause. Then he shrugged off his jacket, folded it in half, and placed it gently over my shoulders. The weight of it grounded me in place.
Warm. Familiar. Mine.
And then, slowly, deliberately, he turned to Vera, who touched my wife. No anger in his tone, just the sort of quiet that makes people choke on their champagne. No one answered, but everyone knew. Someone gasped. A glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered against the floor. Still, no one moved. Zinnia blinked. Wife. I didn't flinch. Yes, I said, meeting her stare. Surprised? So were you when I showed up wearing dignity. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Sometimes silence says everything. Dorian didn't speak again. He didn't need to. The coat around my shoulders, the way he stood beside me, it spoke volumes. Not one person stepped forward to apologize. Not one voice rose to challenge him. Because the game had changed. They just hadn't realized they'd already lost. I bent down, picked up the torn piece of emerald silk that once belonged to my mother. I folded it with the same care I'd once used to wrap Zinnia's gift, tucked it into the inside pocket of Dorian's coat. Then I slipped my hand into the crook of his elbow. And we turned. We walked out. Not a retreat. A reversal. Outside, the night air was sharp and cleansing. The hush of the ballroom felt miles away, like something I'd watched on a screen rather than lived through. Dorian didn't say a word until we reached the car. I didn't need him to. But when we stopped, when I turned to face him fully for the first time, he broke the silence. You ready to go home? I shook my head. Not yet. There's one more thing I need to do first. He nodded. No questions. Just trust. Because dignity is walking out with your spine straight and your silence sharper than any scream. But justice? Justice means coming back with more than a bruised heart. It means coming back with proof. We sat in silence while the engine hummed beneath us. Not even the tick of the blinker broke the stillness. Outside the window, the streetlights cast long, spidery shadows across the sidewalk. Inside the car, I held a manila folder on my lap, bulging slightly at the edges, corners softened by too much handling. Inside that folder was proof. Proof that I had not imagined the betrayal. That what I felt in my bones had a paper trail. I opened it slowly, almost reverently, like it held pieces of my mother's voice. Photocopies of property transfers. Email printouts showing my address crossed out in red and replaced with Vera's. A notarized affidavit from the tax office clerk, apologizing for the mix-up. And then the signature page. My name, sloppily signed. Not mine. And next to it, the clean, confident curve of Vera's handwriting. False, forged, criminal. Looking back now, I should have known from the beginning that she was planning something deeper than social sabotage. But I didn't want to believe my mother's grave had become someone else's inheritance. That's where it all started. 3 weeks ago, I'd opened my old P.O. box on a whim. I hadn't used it since before Mom passed. Inside was a letter postmarked 6 months prior. From the county assessor's office. A change in property tax records. New ownership documentation filed under my name, but with a different address. One I hadn't lived at in over a decade. I'd never signed anything. I'd never agreed to transfer the deed. It was the house Mom left me. The only thing she managed to hold on to after the divorce. I remember Vera's voice at that family dinner 2 months ago. It's funny how easy paperwork is when people stop paying attention. They all laughed. I hadn't. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. I pulled the letter out again, held it under the dome light. My mother's signature was faint, barely legible on the original document. She'd signed it with trembling hands 3 weeks before she died. But the signature on the updated version? Crisp.
Perfect.
Too perfect. My lawyer had noticed immediately. This isn't just fraud, she'd said, flipping through the pages with clinical precision. This is premeditated. Intentional. I had nodded. Not because I agreed. Because I was done waiting for people to call wrong things wrong. Dorian hadn't spoken the entire ride. He didn't need to. He rested his hand gently on the gear shift between us. Close enough to reach me, not close enough to intrude. When I closed the folder and exhaled, he glanced sideways. Want me to push harder? He asked. The offer hung in the air.
Heavy.
Real. I could have said yes. Let him bring his lawyers, his resources, his power. But I didn't. No, I said, tightening my grip on the folder. I want to do it myself. That was the difference between surviving and reclaiming. The next morning, I walked into the law office alone. Slid the folder across the polished oak desk like it was a resignation letter. But it wasn't. It was an announcement. I wasn't going to fight for my place in the family anymore. I was going to prove they had no right to take it in the first place. My attorney reviewed the documents again, this time with sharper interest. She flagged the mismatched dates, the backdated notary stamp, the witness line left blank. This isn't just civil, she murmured. This could be criminal. I nodded. Good. Because consequences weren't vindictive. They were overdue. Back in the car that night, I flipped to the last page.
The deed.
The real one. My mother's handwriting was shaky, but unmistakable. She'd left the house to me. Her daughter. Her only child. My name written with care. With love. Below it, Vera's version.
Forged. Neat.
Efficient. I stared at both signatures. One honest. One weaponized. She used a pen. I whispered. I snapped the folder shut with a click that echoed in my chest. I'll use the law. The paper in my hand still carried the faint scent of old ink and cardboard, but my fingers felt steadier than they ever had. The letterhead bore the county seal, crisp and unflinching. This wasn't a whisper. This wasn't a plea. It was proof. And now I was placing it on a long mahogany table, surrounded by the same people who had spent years pretending I was too fragile, too distant, too busy to notice what they were taking. But I'd noticed. Vera was pouring tea again like it was still the 1950s, like formalities could erase forged signatures and backdated deeds. Zinnia sat poised, legs crossed like a woman in a lifestyle ad, her hands folded just right, until they weren't. Let's keep this civilized, Vera said, her smile taut. There's no need to make this personal. I looked at the envelope, then at her. You forged my name on a property transfer, and you want to keep this polite? That's where it all started. I just thought you didn't care, Zinnia chimed in, reaching for a biscotti she didn't need. You were always so separate. I didn't respond. She was poking, testing how far I'd come. But I wasn't here for her nostalgia or selective amnesia. I was here for my mother's house. The one with the peeling shutters and the herb garden out back that still smelled like her. I pulled out the will, unfolded it slowly, precisely, and I laid it on the table. Mom's signature was frail but still intact.
Witnessed.
Notarized. Filed correctly. She had left it all to me. The house. The land. The trust fund that was supposed to help young girls in transitional housing. The same fund Vera had recently announced as her new philanthropic mission. The attorney leaned in, adjusted her glasses. This supersedes any revisions not made under clear mental and legal capacity. Vera's face didn't change, but her throat twitched. Just once. Zinnia's hand slipped from the biscotti. Wait, she said, her voice higher than usual. But I thought. You thought you'd inherit everything because I was too tired to fight, I said quietly. And for a long moment, no one spoke. That's when she said it. Zinnia rolled her eyes, the way she always had when she felt cornered. You were never supposed to stay. Dad just didn't know how to kick you out. She looked directly at me like the words were overdue.
Dad didn't flinch.
He didn't deny it. He didn't even look sorry. He just shifted in his seat and stared at the fireplace like it might offer a script for how to be human again. That silence did more damage than anything Vera had ever done, because it was the sound of someone choosing not to love you. And I didn't need to ask why anymore. The attorney cleared her throat. I assume, she said, scanning the room, this changes the terms of any current discussions. Zinnia's fiancé leaned forward. He had remained mostly quiet until now, watching the emotional train wreck unfold like someone trying to decide whether to intervene or get out of the way. You lied about your assets? He asked, voice sharp. Zinnia opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. It was my mother's idea, she said, pointing at Vera, eyes wide. He pushed back from the table. I don't care whose idea it was, he said. You misled me. About the trust. About the house. About your involvement. She stood. We can talk about this later. He shook his head.
No, he said.
We won't. And then he left.
Just like that.
Zinnia turned to Vera, who offered no comfort. And I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. I looked across the table at my father. He looked tired. Older. Not from age, but from the weight of years spent choosing ease over ethics. You didn't lose a daughter, I said, keeping my voice even. You gave one away.
He didn't speak.
Didn't argue. Didn't apologize. Just stared. And in that silence, something broke. But this time it wasn't me. The courtroom felt colder than it should have. Not because of the marble floors or the stale hum of the air conditioning. It wasn't the impersonal echoes of high ceilings or the low murmur of lawyers flipping pages that sent chills down my spine. No, the coldness came from something deeper. From what sat between us all, like an invisible barrier. Truth, written in ink. Silence, forged by choice. And betrayal, no longer hiding behind polished smiles. The judge didn't need long. He had read through the evidence. We all had. Pages of documents, dates that didn't align, signatures that varied just enough to raise suspicion, screenshots, emails, and then, finally, the nail in the coffin, a video clip. Vera, dressed in a red gown, drink in hand, laughing at a charity gala just 2 days after she claimed to be home caring for my unstable condition. In the video, she said it herself. We handled it internally, she smirked to another guest.
It was easier that way.
Less mess. Now, in the courtroom, she sat 2 rows behind me. Her lips were so tightly pressed together, they had all but disappeared. Her fingers fidgeted with the gold clasp on her purse, over and over like it was a ritual, or maybe a lifeline. And my father? He sat in the witness box. Not with guilt. That would have required a kind of courage he didn't carry. No, what he wore was something quieter, something older.
Defeat.
That was where it all started to end. The court ruled faster than I expected. The estate, our family home, was to be vacated within 30 days. Any accounts tied to the fraudulent documents would be frozen, effective immediately, pending criminal investigation. The inheritance my father had manipulated, the trust funds Vera claimed were hers by birthright, the forged paperwork tying my identity to instability, they were all exposed and dismantled. Zinnia screamed. Not a whimper, not a cry. A scream. Unfiltered.
Raw.
It wasn't the kind of sound you hear from someone upset about losing money. It was the sound of someone watching her empire of illusions collapse, brick by brick, lie by lie. Vera didn't scream. She didn't move. She just stared at the judge as if maybe stillness could turn back time, as if refusing to react would somehow undo what had been revealed. The bailiff announced the next case, but the sound didn't register.
To me, it was all static now.
I stood, collected my bag, and walked toward the exit without looking back. Reporters were already swarming outside. I could hear them shouting my name before I even reached the doors. Flashes erupted. Can you comment on the verdict? Is it true your father transferred your assets without consent? Are you planning to press charges? Their voices chased me, trying to tie sound bites to a story that had never really belonged to the public until now. But I didn't stop. I didn't smile. I didn't explain. Because when your name has been dragged through whispered rooms, erased from documents, spoken of only in shame or pity, reclaiming it doesn't require a press conference. It requires clarity. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was always this size. Or maybe it shrank in the shadow of the people who used to fill it. The white columns, once grand, were now chipped. The front porch was lined with cardboard boxes marked fragile in black Sharpie. Movers waited, unsure if they should start. Vera paced on the lawn, barking into her phone. Her voice was shrill, desperate. Zinnia sat on the bottom step, heels kicked off, mascara streaked down her face, staring blankly into the hedge like it held answers. Or escape. And then there was my father. He stood just outside the gate. Not on the porch. Not beside them. Just there. As though proximity might earn him forgiveness. He saw me coming and straightened up. His hand reached into his pocket and produced a small, familiar set of keys, the ones that had always hung on the hook by the kitchen door. He extended them to me, eyes lowered. I never wanted this to happen, he said. I stared at him. At the man who had taught me how to ride a bike, who used to lift me onto his shoulders at summer fairs. The same man who had stood silently while my name was stripped from bank accounts, while my character was questioned in front of strangers, while my inheritance was quietly signed away. You let it happen, I replied. He flinched, just barely, but didn't pull his hand back. They're yours, he said quietly. You earned them. I looked past him, toward the house. Its windows were shuttered. The paint had begun to peel. And from the old oak tree in the front yard, the swing Mom and I built together still hung worn but still holding. And yet I felt nothing. Not nostalgia. Not sadness. Just a quiet knowing that this place, like the people who had tried to keep it from me, no longer had a claim on me. Keep them, I said, pushing the keys back into his hand. It's not mine anymore either. He looked up. I still see your mother in you, he said, like it was meant to be a compliment. But I didn't blink. Then you should have protected her memory better. I turned and walked. No ceremony. No applause. No tears. No final hug for the cameras. Just distance. Earned. Needed. Because closure doesn't always come with a tidy bow or a family photo. Sometimes closure is quiet. A decision. A boundary. It's not about burning the house down. It's about walking away without the weight of the past shackled to your ankles. I didn't know what was waiting for me on the other side of that street, beyond the reporters, beyond the years I'd spent trying to belong to a place that never really made room for me. But I knew this much. Whatever was next, it wasn't behind that gate. And it wasn't theirs to take from me ever again. I didn't burn the house down. I simply refused to live in it anymore. There was no moment of grand declaration. No keys thrown. No dramatic locking of doors. Just a quiet choice, made one morning while the light stretched long across my kitchen table. That was the morning I signed the endowment papers. The foundation would carry my mother's name. Not mine. Not his. Not anyone else's. The Lydia Morvan Foundation. For every girl they forgot. That's where it all started. The center opened on a Tuesday. Spring sunlight filled the new wing. Floor-to-ceiling windows spilled brightness onto polished wood floors. Volunteers moved like dancers, fluid, purposeful. On the wall by the main entrance, carved into a slab of reclaimed oak, was the plaque. Her name. Not gilded, not loud, just carved.
Permanent.
I touched the grooves with my fingers, the way I used to trace the lines in her palm when I was a child, asking when I'd grow up. She always said, when you stop needing to ask. Now I understood what she meant. I didn't ask anyone for permission to do this. And still, people came. They shook my hand, smiled, applauded when the ribbon was cut. But I didn't feel like a hero or a victor. I felt aligned, because some stories don't end with applause. They end with knowing who you are, without needing the room to agree. Dorian waited for me on the rooftop garden. He didn't bring flowers. He didn't plan a surprise.
He just brought himself. Calm.
Present. He held out a folded card. Inside was one line, in his handwriting. You never needed permission. I looked up at him. I needed time, I said. He nodded, took my hand, didn't speak. And that, somehow, was louder than every lie they ever told. Across the street, Vera passed by the center. She didn't look up, but she walked slower than usual. I watched her from behind the tinted glass. I wondered if she recognized the oak slab, if she could feel its weight, even without touching it. That plaque wasn't for her, but it would not let her forget either. Zinnia hadn't been seen in town since the court ruling. The engagement was off. The press had moved on. But I knew better than to believe silence meant peace. It just meant they weren't in control anymore. And maybe that was enough. I don't visit the old house. I don't scroll their social media. I don't check who's mentioned me in whispers. Because I don't need to be remembered by people who built their identity by denying mine. I visit the center once a week. I sit on the bench beneath Mom's plaque. Watch the girls come in, some confident, some scared, all of them carrying stories that deserve to be seen. Sometimes they ask who Lydia was. I tell them, she believed names should never be forgotten. And sometimes that's all they need to hear. Closure isn't something you wait for. It's something you become. And my name? It might not be famous. It might not be written in lights. But it's carved in oak. And it's not going anywhere. Looking back, maybe the house never needed to be mine. Maybe the lesson was simpler than that. You don't need to win the past to reclaim your future. What would you have done if your own father stood silent while others humiliated you? Have you ever been erased by the people who should have protected you? Tell me in the comments. And if Althea's story moved something in you, subscribe to this channel for more stories that speak where words once failed.